It's the end of the day with Ray Saturday special. Hey, in that intersection between the digital and physical world, today I have Wendy Marx, and Wendy Marx is the author of a book. It's a brand new book out there, and it's called Thriving at 50 Plus, the 7 Principles to Reinvent and Rebrand Yourself. And the first time I met Wendy was actually in the digital intersection, and she reached out to me last summer. And she said, hey, Ray, I've been watching you on LinkedIn and I want to do an interview with you. So I was super excited about that. And Wendy, we had that conversation, I think it was last July. You know, I told you some things about me. You said you were writing a book to help that baby boomer, those plus 50ers, you know, reinvent themselves. And with all this new technology, you were interested in my story. And it was an honor for me to tell you that story. And just so you know, folks, you know, I'll let her talk, I promise. Just so you know, I am in chapter 2. So, Wendy, I'm super excited that I'm in chapter 2. And tell us, how's it going? And you know, what made you want to write this book?
Oh, well, Ray, you really made a difference for my book. And it was wonderful to meet you and connect with you and interview you. And I'm super excited as well about my book, which just recently launched on Amazon. And I'm proud to say that it's a bestseller in a number of categories up there. And I wrote this book, Ray. It's interesting. For a number of years, I headed up a PR firm, a B2B PR firm. And a lot of the work that we did was personal branding executives. And I've always been fascinated with personal branding and reinvention. And in fact, I've reinvented myself. I'm now on my 5th reinvention.
All right.
And I happened online to meet somebody, a Georgetown University professor who runs a book writing program. He reached out to me and asked me if I knew anybody who wanted to write a book, a young person. I said, well, I'm not quite the young person. I'm a mature student. Would you take me? And he said, yes. And before I knew it, I was in a book writing program, no idea what I was going to write about. And as a result of being in that program, I reconnected with my interest in personal branding and reinvention. And in fact, one of the points that I make in the book, Ray, is that you don't just sit on the couch and say to yourself, gee, I think I'll reinvent myself. Mm-hmm. You really come by that by taking action. And I found that out myself with being in this course. I was able to realize what I really wanted to do and find a new passion.
Well, I got to tell you, you know, it's an interesting topic, and I think this whole pandemic kind of brings this to light because there's a lot of our fellows in their 50s, and you know, I'm getting ready to go into the next 10 years, kind of scary. But there's a lot of us out there that are finding ourselves either unemployed, maybe some downsizing, unemployment, you know, 22 million people out there. A lot of those are the baby boomers. And a lot of them, I'm sure, are thinking, you know, maybe it's my time. Maybe it's time I get out there and I do something different. I reinvent myself. What are some of the nuggets we can get out of the book? I know you have 7 principles. Real quickly, what are those 7 principles?
Yes, I do want to get into them, Ray. But before I do, I just want to comment on what you said because I think it's so important that with this pandemic, everybody's life, whether they wanted to or not, has changed. And it really is an opportunity and it's not only opportunity, many of us will need to reinvent our lives and our careers. And in the book, and as a result of my research and interviews, I've come up with 7 principles. And the first principle is having a growth mindset. And what that means is that a lot of people, they are successful and they become a bit rigid. They don't want to change. And I know you're not one of those, Ray. You've been an exemplar of changing and taking advantage of new technology. So that's the first principle, is having a growth mindset. The second one is a willingness being willing to be uncomfortable. And the fact is that if you're going to reinvent yourself and change, there's a period of time where it's not going to feel easy. and you need to ride that through.
Mm-hmm.
And the people who successfully reinvent themselves do that. So that is the second principle. The third one, which you're a poster child for, is a willingness to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And what I found is that people who successfully reinvent themselves are constantly learning, trying things out. And with that willingness to learn, they're willing to fail.
Mm-hmm.
That part of growing and changing is taking some risks.
Yep.
And you will fail at times, but you need to just rise up and move on.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the third principle. The fourth one is finding your purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And this pandemic is actually an excellent time for people to dig in, look at themselves, and decide what do they really want to do with the rest of their lives.
Yep.
So that's what finding your purpose is about. The fifth principle is about storytelling. If you're going to reinvent yourself, part of that process is coming up with a coherent story,
Mm-hmm.
a story that ties in with what you were as well as what you want to be. And it needs to be a story that's easy to tell, that makes people want to engage with you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the third principle. And the that's the fifth principle. The sixth principle is personal branding. Personal branding is giving yourself a brand, like a product has a brand or a service.
Mm-hmm.
People don't often think of themselves as a brand, but in fact, you need to be today. You need to be distinctive.
Mm-hmm.
People want to know exactly what you're about, and that brand makes it obvious. And in my book, I talk about not only why it's important, but how to do it.
Okay.
And then my last principle is social media and mentoring. And part of reinvention is using social media. That's a way that you're going to get yourself known. Otherwise, you could reinvent yourself till kingdom come, and if no one knows about you, it doesn't do much good. And as part of that last principle, I also talk about mentoring. And mentoring is having somebody to kind of bounce ideas off. You're never too old to have a mentor.
Nope, I agree.
We think sometimes that you have to be young, but people 50 plus will really benefit from having a mentor, somebody who can kind of hold their hand, not physically, but virtually, and help them go through the whole process.
Well,
so that in a nutshell, those are the 7 principles, Ray.
Well, and the reality of it is a mentor for an older person or for the baby boomer generation could very well be the younger generation. I mean, you mentioned social media and all this technology, and a lot of these younger kids know this a whole lot better than we do, and they can really help in that area and inspire us to do more of this. I mean, a lot of our generation looks at all the things that the younger generation is doing on social media. We think it's a bad thing, when in all reality, we're communicating. I met you through that social intersection, that digital intersection, as I call it. We formed a relationship. I'm in your book. You wrote a book. You're promoting your book on LinkedIn, where a lot of the people that are trying to reinvent and rebrand themselves are at. So that's kudos to you. So how are the sales going so far in the book?
They're going really well. I'm really excited. As I said, I'm a bestseller, a #1 bestseller in a number of categories in Amazon, and have all 5-star reviews. So I'm really excited about that. And people really seem to be interested and want to grab a copy.
Can you show us what the book looks like?
Yes, I would.
And then give us the ad, how we can get
that,
it.
Ray.
There we go. Boom. So Thriving at 50, the 7 principles to reinvent and rebrand yourself. Wendy Marx, the author. And you can reach her. You can reach out at Wendy at thriving@50plus.com. I'll put a link to this on the video, so you all can all go there and click on that and go ahead and get the downloaded version, order the hardback. You know, Wendy, is pretty exciting stuff, man. You know, you going to write another book?
I'm going to be focusing on this one for the moment, Ray.
Okay.
I also wanted to add that you don't have to be 50 plus to read this book. Mm-hmm. That really today, so many people at any age need to reinvent themselves, and the same principles truly apply.
I would agree. I would agree with that. Well, Wendy, I got to tell you, it was great to have you on the end of the day with Ray on my Saturday special. And you want anything to say before I close this up?
Thank you so much, Ray, for having me. You're a terrific host, and I'm so glad that we connected.
Well, I'm honored to be in your book, you know, and I can't wait to finish reading it. And Wendy, I'm going to end this like I always do. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck in status quo, and we'll see y'all on Monday.